All right. Here we go. For sound check sounds good. Visual looks great. Thank you for reporting from the Millennial Falcon in the middle of a battle.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. So, Michael Rice, I was introduced to you through our voter block up here in North Texas. Our voter block is specifically, countering and trying to build a large contingency of voters who want at least to second question and second guess the industrial projects that are going on, breaking ground, or being proposed up here in North Texas as they are around Texas. And that includes obviously data centers, green energy builds, battery plants, all the buzzwords these days. And if you attend, right, if you go to these meetings and you go to the commissioner court meetings, which the public is encouraged to do and should do, city council meetings, all the above, you will see a very different picture of the things being proposed. You'll learn a lot of words. You'll learn a lot of processes that you probably weren't aware of how these local entities work. And one of those has been the tax abatement discussion. I'm heavily involved up here in North Texas. This is Grayson County, Fannin County, this area up here by the Red River. I was introduced to you from our voter block, the lady that leads our voter block, to you who are down in Leon County.
Yep.
Other side of the Texas world, basically. But the same
Different
discussion,
climate, for sure.
For sure. But the same discussions are going on there. And the abatement conversation, abatement's like one of those words like filibusters and all those other things that we've been forced to kind of understand now as the general tax-paying public about what these mean and how much goes into them. And so the abatement process, the abatement conversation has come up because these large industrial scale projects like a data center are essentially feeding on a tax abatement as a gateway to build in these counties. So I'll leave it at that because I'd want you're certainly really well studied in this subject, but I'd like to hear from you and about what you've encountered about really what a tax abatement is. What should the general public just be aware from, like, what a tax abatement is? Because it does not only apply to data centers and all this modern stuff going on. They've been around forever.
Yeah, I think they made it into Texas law, I want to say in like 1987. It's these things have been around for a long time. And despite what your county commissioners or city government may tell you, they are incentives. They are tax incentives. The comptroller of Texas defines them as incentives. The companies asking for them know that they're tax incentives. About the only pushback I've had on calling them tax incentives, it comes from our commissioner's court.
Yep.
In fact, before I logged on here, I was getting ready to cut another clip of them today insisting that it's not an incentive. But the way that they work is you're abating, getting rid of tax for a certain amount of time. In Texas, it's not to exceed 10 years, but you can renew a tax abatement. I know you can do it at least once. You might be able to do it more than once. So you're looking at a potential 20-year abatement, right? Where they're not going to pay a certain amount of taxes for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And then generally what goes along with those is going to be a pilot payment in lieu of taxes. And some of those have teeth and some of them don't. And, the smaller counties like the one we live in here in Leon, we have 16,000 people. They insist that, we need to negotiate this thing with teeth so we can get a seat at the negotiation table and, get all these restrictions in place. And my question is always, well, who's going to enforce that? Like, we get that into a contract. Who's going to enforce it? Is it the company going to just follow the rules? I mean, are we bringing on new branches of government to go over there and enforce it? Or we, it'll be in the contract. It'll be in the contract. Which doesn't answer the question. It just leaves it open. So
you have a large industrial company, a developer like Black Mountain, which we've heard who and what Black Mountain does now at this point. They go in and negotiate the abatement, which is an incentive. It's almost defined as an incentive. I don't even understand why.
It is. It's not almost defined as an incentive. It is literally defined as an incentive.
Yep. So Black Mountain, being a multi-billion-dollar massive company, goes into a little county like Fannin County with 4 commissioners okay, says yes, 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 yes. No problem. We'll enforce this. We'll turn down the volume. We'll build our own power plant. We'll do all this other stuff for a 10-year tax abatement. We might put a little skin in the game for, let's just say, a wastewater treatment plant or a few stoplights, or put some money into the school as our pilot money.
Well, they
Okay.
can't put it in your school.
Okay. They can't put it in the school. Okay.
Well, they can make a donation to the school, but they can't. Your school board would have to accept the donation.
Okay. Got it. So in lieu of schools, but they can do traffic infrastructure. They could do wastewater treatment plants. They could do.
It should be county related stuff. It normally is county related stuff. If the county is the one doing the abatement, the infrastructure tends to be county related stuff.
Okay. So Black Mountain comes in, they close that deal. Now they have an operating partner who's actually going to bring the bulldozers in, lay the concrete, and build this 1 million square foot massive hyperscale facility. And what makes them, who's out there enforcing the guidelines of that abatement at that point?
Great question. I have not seen that. I don't have answers to that. Every time I ask who's going to be doing the enforcing, and how do we know they're following the rules and things like that. If I'm a neighbor and you got noise, some kind of noise mitigation in, who do I call? Where's my, how do I know? Are they going to put? And no one has an answer, right?
Yeah.
So what I've seen in our county is just explanations of it'll be in the contract. It'll be in the contract. Now we're in a good spot right now whereby data centers, we've only had one apply for a tax abatement and they got rejected because the county only had some real old tax abatement guidelines online, and they wanted to update their tax abatement guidelines before agreeing to grant an abatement. And so that's kind of where we're at now. But Black Mountain is one of the companies that has come to town, and in 2024, they were granted a tax abatement, and we have not been able to find like all the details of what we even got out of that deal. So,
well, there's a similar situation in Fannin County where almost like with pixie dust and the magic of construction in the middle of the night, a best battery plant got built right in Fannin County, right in the backyards of many of its residents. And apparently, a tax abatement policy an old one was brought up, approved, whatever goes on behind the scenes. And now you have a battery plant, which is usually the feeder cell into larger industrial projects that are going to marry up to it.
Yeah.
And that coincidentally aligns with the proposed data center that's on the Fannin County, Grayson County line. Now, the other issue with this, so let me back up too, because the reason I asked that question about enforcement is because you look at, there's the data center in Florida that has just decided to run its diesel backup generators instead of trying to make power, so it's running
the XAI one.
Yep.
I think that is that in Georgia, not Florida.
Maybe Georgia. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Or maybe even Mississippi. But I know the ones you're talking about where they've just brought in trailer loads of diesel generators to power the facility.
Yep. And then there's, noise issues in Virginia, Iowa, all those
They're
things
everywhere.
that weren't, where a developer, not an engineer, a team of people that were 5 years ago building multi-unit high rises and strip malls, now all of a sudden are experts in hyperscale data centers who are telling the general public, don't worry about the noise. It's no more than a 3-lane highway, which I don't want to live near a 3-lane highway. I live out in the country, and you don't either. But that's how they've downplayed it, because that's their expertise at this stage. And then what they're finding now is that, they turn these things on, and a natural gas power plant is a jet engine going down the runway.
Yes.
24/7 with building guidelines and codes where there's houses 150 to 200 feet from the property line of a data center. So the enforcement,
if you're lucky, right? Because if it's in an unincorporated part of the county, hell, it could be right on the property line, and there isn't a darn thing you can do about it. You know?
And I think you're right. And I think the challenge, like listening to Abbott define, rural neighborhoods, I don't know what a rural neighborhood
I
is at
don't either.
all.
None of us have been able to figure that out.
Yeah. And it seems to be somehow in the political scheming and writing of all this stuff, it seems to be a phrase he's sticking with, although I have not seen a rural neighborhood yet. And we live in a rural county. So, with that all aside, I think the enforcement's a very big issue. And when you are presented, when you go to a commissioner's meeting in your county, which again, I encourage everybody should do,
Yes.
you can tell that, and I'm not saying any of these people are bad or whatever, but they are not prepared for this conversation with these massive companies like a Black Mountain.
Look, Black Mountain, they're lawyers. I guarantee you, they are Ivy League lawyers, right?
100%. Yeah.
And if you're anything like our county, small county, I'm sure the county attorney, is probably a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reason that he lives in Leon County and only makes $70,000 to $100,000 a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because he didn't go to Harvard. He's
Yep.
he's not a Ivy League attorney. And so he doesn't even have a chance going up against a team, not just
Yep.
like one or two. They got a team of these
Yep.
people that are going up against our counties. And even if our counties decide, okay, look, this is more than we can handle, we're bringing in some air quote professionals, right, from Austin or Dallas or the San Antonio area, whatever. Man, it's the companies they're bringing in to help represent them. All they do is tax abatements.
Yeah.
That's their main thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to hear, hey, don't get into this. You're going to hear, let's see if we can sweeten the deal, right?
Yep.
And so you're not going to have any opposition because that attorney they're bringing in is going to get paid additional money to make sure that tax abatement goes through. And they'll probably do a better job at negotiating the contract than
Yep.
maybe just your county attorney would do. But if you know any attorneys that go fight for legislation changes or go fight contracts in court, you're fighting 3 and 4 letter words primarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're taking a shall and making it or taking mays and making them shalls and things like that, because little nuances like that can completely destroy your contract and make it have no teeth at all.
Yeah. And you think about, I know our county, Grayson's a little bigger than Fannin, but we're always strapped for money. I mean, budget discussion and, infrastructure, especially in a place like Grayson County. I know it's pretty far away from you, but it's it's just north of, Collin County, which is one of the fastest growing parts in the whole world, right? We got the world moving in, for good or bad or ugly, but we got you got the world moving into Collin County, and that's just below us. I mean, that's 10 miles from here and it's moving up quick. And so we're behind on our first responders,
Are y'all all volunteers?
Yeah, it's all volunteer. Yeah. That's a challenge. And again, that becomes a challenge when you're talking about these big industrial complexes. What happens in an emergency? We don't have the capability to handle a large scale emergency or a lithium fire. I mean,
our nearest hazmat team in our cog is a little over an hour and 15 or an hour and 20 minutes away. They're in South College Station. So depending on traffic and what time something like that happens, they could be an hour and 15 to an hour and 45 minutes away easily before they could even get here.
Yeah. So it's clear that it's a scary kind of contentious moment for these counties, because the developer, and I've said this from the beginning, in my fight, I said, I'm not going to be the picket sign pointing finger, because I don't necessarily have anything against the advancement of technology and software and AI and processing and everything. But the developer business is a dirty business, and it's taking advantage of these counties and these commissioners. It's going after the lowest hanging fruit. Like you said, the Ivy League trained lawyers know exactly the scare tactic, exactly they know that their budget constraints, they know all the challenges that these counties face, and they're going to exploit all of them, even down to knowing exactly what infrastructure they need, and roads and police. I mean, I hope this isn't happening, but it's been very out in the open that, Grayson County is a massive rural county, and you have volunteer services in unincorporated areas, which is almost 800 square miles, very understaffed and under budgeted.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're Black Mountain and you said, "Hey, you need $3 million to balance the budget and get more policing, more jail cell space, all this other
Right.
stuff," it's a rounding error.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then they're they're giving up, and then somewhere along the lines, one of these local politicians can almost look like a hero, saying, "Hey, I brought in all this new business, and now
Yep.
we're balancing the budget," and then 5 years later, we have completely displaced entire populations in small towns within those counties now because you've made unlivable conditions and zero property values out of all the places next to these centers. So the juicy part you and I were talking about last week, which I think was so interesting, because I left one of the county commissioner meetings just fired up because I just watched them just completely ignore the public and make a vote after 6 hours of the public passionately, you know, putting in their recommendations for a tax abatement public commission, meaning a group of public people who can help on this abatement process. And everybody came with their recommendations and was well represented. And then the county commissioners just already had their list made up, didn't listen to anybody, and just flapped them off. And it turns out all the people on the list are already in their camp already. So you look at it, and then listening to the judge who was in the center of them, it was very contentious between the commissioners and the judge. And you have outgoing people, you have people that are, their term is up, and then you have new people coming in. You can tell that conversations have gone on without the public's knowledge. First, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that that's happened. But then secondly, unanimously, the constant feedback from these counties is we're going to be sued and we're going to go out of business. We are going to be sued out of existence. Now, I just using, not even using AI, just using Google, internet search, I can't find anywhere where, in tax code 312, the Texas code and the abatement policy, it clearly states you cannot sue. It's discretionary. A county
Right.
can make up its own choice to provide an abatement or not.
Right. If it
So,
was mandatory, there wouldn't be a government code for it, and it wouldn't be something that they could do. Right. It would just happen. The state would handle this because we wouldn't get a say in it. The county commissioners wouldn't get a say in it.
yeah. So, you brought up some interesting, you obviously done your homework. You brought up some interesting, and I'm not saying point any fingers or anything like that, but the fact that I can tell which politicians have had the big conversations with the big developers because they all say the same thing. This is a race with China. It's for our tech future. They're all reading a script, almost
Right.
verbatim, like they've been handed a script. And even if they are essentially against it, they have to pad it like, yes, this is not going to be the best thing for our infrastructure, but man, China, 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 right? We're going to lose to China. And then the same thing with this lawsuit potential. All you hear are the judges and everybody say, we're going to be sued. We're going to be sued. How could everybody unanimously have like the same response when the general public can look up the tax code and it clearly states in that tax code that it won't happen?
Well, you just don't know how this works. That's the most famous line that I hear this on a regular basis. But I want to first address that China thing. So this is one that I go up against constantly. And I'll tell you what, I will accept that logic of we have to beat China the microsecond that you can build and populate one of these facilities without China in the supply line. Because China can do it without us in the supply line, but we can't do it without China in the supply line. Period.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter to me whether it's with the magnets that are going to go in the components or whether it's some of the components themselves. Whatever it is, you can't build a data center, a battery storage, a solar. Like there's no way to get any of these things done without China in the supply line. So this race to me just doesn't exist. It reminds me of the propaganda that we needed back in the Cold War against Russia, 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 right? We
Mhm.
needed to band together and beat Russia and blah, blah, blah. And I just don't see that as a possibility right now. Like I said, the microsecond that we can get one of these things done without China in the supply line, I'm happy to revisit that
Yeah. So
conversation.
the faster we build these things, the more revenue we're providing to China. Like
Absolutely.
so
Right.
they're probably creating that script
Sure.
and in
Because
some
I
way
mean,
implanting that us.
they process like 90% of the world's rare earth minerals, right? And things like this. That's the components that go into the components, right?
Mhm.
So you can't build a stick of RAM,
Yeah.
without their help. So, you know, but then on to the tax abatement part, that one, that one's very frustrating for me. I have read the code over and over and over. I've read the tax code, not just the 312 code, but like the Texas tax code for like chapter 26 that defines where are the formula that you have to use in order to figure out what your tax rate can be and things like that. There's a math formula in there. It's
Mhm.
law. It's not just some arbitrary numbers that somebody picked. It's a formula that has to be followed. And you can't bankrupt a county based on
Yeah.
that. But there's training. So every commissioner in the state and judge, they're all required by law to take, I want to say 16 hours of continuing education that has to do with something in their field, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's human resources or trash or whatever. Um, Tax abatement training is one of the hot topics, especially right now. And so there has been tax abatement training going on at these continuing education seminars that they hold for county judges and commissioners. Most recently, on July 20th at Lake Conroe, there was a training. And during that training, the commissioners are taught that if you don't grant a tax abatement, that you can bankrupt the county. I mean, it's laughable, especially when just go read through
Mhm.
the 312 and then go read through chapter 26. You're just like, there's no way, right? Like the auditor should be able to answer this question for the county. The chief appraiser at the county should be able to put that to rest. Any tax attorney that is working tax stuff for the county, I would imagine that most counties are using some third party tax attorney to
Yep.
handle collections and stuff when you don't pay
Yep.
pay your taxes. Any of those folks should be able to put this goofy thing to rest. But so many of them also believe this training that has been circulating, where if you don't grant tax abatements, you can bankrupt the county.
So we were able to, and a quick point on that is when we spoke last week, we were able to look up, what commissioners attended because it's
Yep.
public record, and everyone that you named in the two counties that affect us up here, verbatim, all said, we have to provide an abatement or we're going to be sued.
Yeah.
And
Now, the
so,
training doesn't tell them that they have to provide the abatement or you'll be sued. The training says that if you don't do the tax abatement, that you're going to bankrupt the county because you're
Mhm.
going to have to lower your tax rate to zero. And then you'll effectively collect no taxes for a year. And then that'll make you insolvent. And so then you'll be insolvent for a whole year. And then you'll be insolvent for the next year while you're waiting to be able to slightly increase your
Yeah.
rate so that you can bring the county back online, which again, it's not possible. Like you can't do that. That's not the way that formula works. That's not
Yeah.
the way
And
math works.
it's not the way math works, and it hasn't happened. Like, so
No.
if we take the data center, you know, conversation out of the mix, there's been large scale abatement offered industrial projects, like you said, since the late 80s in Texas.
Correct.
And projects have been rejected, and those towns and counties are still in existence. Nobody,
Yes.
nobody, people said,
Well,
no,
and
no, thank you. And then they moved on.
and I guarantee you there's been projects that have shown up, didn't know about the tax abatement stuff because they were just, maybe they're chicken houses, maybe it was a
Mhm.
Sanderson Farms or a Tyson that rolled into town and built a feed mill operation or something in there.
Mhm.
I mean, that's adding millions of dollars worth of revenue overnight to the tax roll. And somehow or another, the county just collected that money and didn't
Yep.
go bankrupt in the process. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So I know that like our state representative up here, Shelley Luther, who's, wonderful, it's just awesome that she's on our team up here because she's very active and she's a shoulder to shoulder advocate with the people up here. And, her stance is like, just no abatements. Like what,
right.
just don't even offer it. If they
Yes,
want to do anything they want to do, they do it with their own money. And
absolutely.
and that came up in commissioner's court, and it was just very clear, like, we can't do that because if we don't offer an abatement, the potential for a lawsuit is high. And I think there was a case down that a lot of people were referencing down in the Hill Country where there was just kind of this rejection of the potential of the data center, and then there was a counter suit, and somehow in that
Is that
counter
Hill
suit,
County?
yeah, in Hill County.
Okay, so I can explain what happened there. What
Okay, great.
happened was it didn't have anything to do with the tax abatement. That the county just voted to create a moratorium. There's a
Got
section
it.
of the Texas government code that says, and it's questionable whether the county has the authority to enact a health-based moratorium on things. Uh, and I can't remember the exact statute it is that they cited, but they said that, based on health and all the unknowns, they wanted to put a 12-month pause moratorium on
Mm-hmm.
new data centers and things like that, so that they could study the impacts that it was going to have on the health and safety of the residents. And that's what the lawsuit was about. It had nothing to do with tax abatements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's
The suit was dropped. They settled out of court for I believe $100,000. So the question still remains: does the county have authority to do this or not? Because just because they settled doesn't mean that the case was, it didn't make it to the Texas Supreme Court.
okay.
And so my personal take on this was Hill County was hoping, because so many people had been talking about moratorium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I don't know, but I personally think that Hill County thought maybe if we do the first one, we'll have 10 or 12 more that do it. And if those 10 or 12 do it, then maybe we'll have 10 or 12 more. And if we could get, 100 or 200 counties, even 100 counties, like if 100 counties would have 50 counties would have made national news like crazy. And I bet we'd be sitting in a special session right now where the legislator got called in to do something. Right. And
Yeah.
I personally think that's what that was about, is they were hoping that other counties, if we go try this, other counties will see that we did it and they'll join us, and maybe we can get a special session called.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what that had to do with. I don't,
which it's a great thought, right? I mean, that's how these things work. We up here in Grayson County 2 Mondays ago, 2 weeks ago today, I guess, we had a Republican rally. Abbott was there. Gil, Shelley Luther hosted it. It was a great event. Got to hear a lot about, the upcoming election and stuff. And it was pretty much an anti-Tellerico event, because I know that Ken Paxton's position is probably the most contentious right now. And there was definitely a little recognition and acknowledgement about the data center conversation. However, I think a lot of people left there with it not being enough of the conversation, and that all of their opponents on the Republican side are doing a lot more, whether they're doing any actionable things. The fact of the matter is our algorithms, people like me and you who are, into this conversation, are full of the Democratic side making a lot of, potential policy and talking about this, the data center conversation a lot more than the Republican side.
Yes.
And I know Abbott has made some, adjustments, if you will, or some policy about a moratorium, no more batch zero applications until they get some more environmental studies. So without really saying moratorium, though.
Right. And I don't know what kind of teeth that actually has, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was my understanding that the PUCT and ERCOT both had told him a few weeks before that they couldn't do that. They had to wait for the legislator to set some kind of legislation in place for them to do that. And so I don't know what changed, whether it's just the folks at PUCT and ERCOT have decided they're going to do it anyway, or if they're just going to wait. I don't really understand. But to me, my understanding of that was just that this is just more flailing around and arm waving with no real teeth. But it seems like maybe something's happening. I don't know though.
I think the voting public would like to see a special session
Yes.
with the word data center up at the top of the agenda and the core of the agenda. I think that would be the righteous thing to do at this point.
Yes.
Followed by a special session on property taxes and everything else that is supposed to have been taken care of over the last 4 terms that hasn't been taken care of. So it's it seems interesting. I mean, I think the good part is seeing the people get educated and be able to have good conversations. And I think that's honestly has stirred the pot the most,
Oh, yeah.
because, I don't think Black Mountain, and I'm only using Black Mountain as an example because they're the ones that are, putting the pressure on up here. I don't think Black Mountain and those companies were prepared to go nose to nose with an educated community.
No.
And, I think they were, obviously they were buying land in silence. They were just kind of knocking on doors and writing checks. And so that's been a cool part to see. And I think it's actually starting to affect, Austin. I think, with just this announcement, as hard as it might have been for the Abbott campaign to say, okay, we have to be in this conversation, regardless who is contributing to our campaigns, and where the money, we have to be a part of this, or we're going to lose the midterms.
Yes.
And that's a big deal. So regardless of what their motivation is, I feel like we're getting into the right spot. But what do you think? What's your take on like local activism from a standpoint of, not letting your county commissioner say that, hey, we went to this training and, if we don't offer these abatements, we're in a dire situation. What's the counter to that besides the fact that it's just not in the code? But what's the counter to that, you think?
It's hard. I have not made any friends in commissioner's court.
I'm sure.
I used to try and go down there and just be, so I'm in IT. I've been working in IT for almost 30 years. And so I thought, I'm going to go down there and just explain this from, the perspective of a principal engineer, right? Like I spent my whole career working my way to the top of this industry so that I can explain these complicated topics to people, and these guys, they just don't know. And I'll go down there and explain this, and they'll understand what the risks are, and they'll believe me, because why wouldn't they? I'm an industry expert in a lot of this stuff. So, I'd go down to court, and they didn't seem like they really valued my opinion. And I thought, well, I am kind of new to the county. I'll keep coming a few times and make my point, and, kind of share my credentials and share, a little bit more information. I'll start putting stuff on Facebook. I'll start putting stuff on my website. And, eventually they're bound to, understand how much more I know about certain topics than they do. And they'll start to value my feedback on this.
Mm-hmm.
And they just didn't, and they didn't, and they didn't. And then it started becoming adversarial, right? Like, I'm recording everything that they do and everything that they say, and I pick it apart, because, if they're not going to listen to me, then I'm going to grab the attention of anyone who will listen to me. Mm-hmm. And so now, I've got a huge following on Facebook, on my personal page, and then also on like pages that I run where we talk about this stuff. And so now it's to the point where I got called a smartass by the commissioners in court the other day. And, it's just, they don't like me at all. So I don't know what to say. I mean, I tried being Mr. Nice Guy and Mr. Helpful. And now I'm just like, gloves off. I'm going to take everything that you say, and, I'm going to show everybody what you say in your own words. I'm not going to twist them. I'm not going to edit them. I'm just going to let everybody see what it is you have to say. And it's nothing I do is helping at this point. And so, I'm just trying to expose everything that they're doing, and get as many people involved as I can. And the more people I know that are calling them regularly and telling them the same information that I'm putting out on the internet, like you just can't fight it, right? You can't fight the truth. They can spin the words all they want, but I don't even use my words, right? Like I go to the comptroller's website and get the
Mm-hmm.
definition. Like, you want to argue that? Okay, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to define what a tax abatement is, but I bet you the head accountant for the state is. Let's see what they have to say about it. And so it gets really difficult for them to continue to argue against me. And
Yeah.
but I don't know that it's helping, right? Because
Yeah.
they're going to ultimately, the decision comes down to the four commissioners, and it comes down to maybe the judge has to get involved if it's a 2-2 split or something like that. Or
Yeah.
but so it's I don't know. I wish I had an answer
Yeah. I'm
because
getting the feeling from a personal sense because I have a little bit of a background in a private equity and startup space. Long before I became the feed store guy and the coffee guy and everything else, the local. But in the heyday, it was this private equity, and it was big, big money, billion-dollar funds and startups and those kind of things. And you can get lulled. And I was educated. I knew who these people were. I was on the company side raising money, so we needed these people, and we needed to perform for these people. But I was also trained to understand the level of BS and the lack of knowledge that a lot of them had in the industries that they were investing in, like healthcare and other things that I was involved in. And you can get lulled into this like sense of like, wow, this is a big table, to be at. These guys are really smart. These are
yeah,
great. And I generally have this feeling, especially after the Fannin County, the commissioner courts that I was at, that they can't they can't roll back the things that were said at that table. And that's the position, that's the tough position because now they're defensive. There was a hot mic moment where our state representative, who's very sharp, she's very outspoken and she's very smart. You know, it was a hot mic moment where the commissioner says, I don't want to listen to this. I'm paraphrasing, but I don't want to listen to this effing lady tell me how to do my job. When actuality is that's all you have to listen to. You're representing your county. Your job is consistent and persistent to the views and the needs of the people that you serve. So it's I feel like they got overwhelmed at this table and got very excited, and it was the biggest table they've ever sat at, and now they have trouble rolling back some of the promises that they made, maybe some of the yeses that they've made, and that's a tough position for them to be in. And it's like a little kid, with his hand caught in the cookie jar. I mean, he's going to lie and be defensive, make
yes,
all the excuses, and now it's pretty clear that some things have gone on. So I I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
oh yeah,
And I meet a lot of people every day in our store. Is very it's a local store, but it's really high volume. We have a lot of friends in the area and stuff, and I'm so surprised that something this big, this is something that could displace the entire town of Bells and Savoy up here in Grayson and Fannin County, because they're going to build them right on top of the schools. They're going to build them right near Main Street. It's going to be an unlivable area. I can't believe that there's people who have worked their entire life, saved up their money, building their dream home on 20, 30 acres, and then are coming into the feed store to talk to the feed store guy because the feed store guy is the first person that has told them that there is potentially a hyperscale 2 million square foot data center with 3 natural gas power plants about to be built 200 yards from their dream property.
right, yeah,
How do we get here? How in the hell do we get here where the citizens, the property owners are this out of the loop? I mean, it's not Texas to me.
no,
That's not
and
the Texas, mindset. And it's because that conversation is not happening from Texans. It's happening from big business outside of Texas where whether it was Abbott or somebody along the line said, hey, we are all data center, here's 350 billion to get the conversation started in tax abatements and you're all welcome. And all of a sudden Abbott's going, oh crap, this could lose my entire this could lose the entire Republican ticket in the state of Texas. Let me be defensive now and reel back, and
Right.
try to figure out something. It's just,
And this is happening
it's
all
wild.
over the state. All
Yeah.
over the state. It's not isolated to your county and my county.
Yep.
Like I've been all over the state speaking. It's happening everywhere. Everywhere I've ever lived I've lived in Texas my entire life. I was raised born and raised in Ector County, and then we moved to Bear County for a few years, and then now we're here in Leon, and I mean I've seen it down in Matagorda, it's happening in Bosque County, it's happening in Robertson County, it's happening everywhere
Yeah.
that I go, it's happening. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nobody who's immune from this. And so that whole why aren't you telling me about this and why am I hearing it on Facebook is that part is the thing that so many people are wrestling with because they feel betrayed,
Hmm.
especially in these small communities. Man, like I go around and I talk and they're like, I've known this guy since I was best friends with his dad. How would he not have the nerve to let me know about this thing that's going on?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
Yeah.
I've only known him for a few months and he's doesn't seem like a very cool guy to me. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. The money plays a big role in that. Do you think, and you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, because I don't want to put you in a bad light, but do you think these trainings, like especially like a tax abatement training for the county commissioners, has been jeopardized at all
yes.
from
I mean,
this money?
I have, well, can you repeat from what? Do I
Like
think
from like let's say Black Mountain, for lack of a better term, is you know sponsoring the training, putting these commissioners up in hotels and everything else, and then they can
so?
dictate some of the language there, or
That part I'm not, I wouldn't want to go out and say yes. So this part reminds me of an interview that George Carlin did a long time ago about, there being a club and you're not in it and there's a conspiracy. And, whoever's arguing with him was like, there's just not a conspiracy. And he's like, they all went to the same schools. They all hang out at the same country clubs. They all know what's good for each other. And so they don't have to meet with each other to have some devious plan. They already know if I do this, it's going to be good for me. And if it's good for me, it's bound to be good for old, Bill up the road. And, so
Mhm.
they already know what they need to do. And so, I don't know if it's been infected. Like, I've being in tech, I've seen when I go to conferences, they're always sponsored by all the companies that want to take money from the company I'm
Yeah,
working for, right?
yeah,
Always.
yep,
And so this is no different with the counties. Their conferences that they're going to are being put on and paid for by all the companies that want something out of your county, whether it's a law firm who's hoping to win the tax cases or the law firm who's trying to win the tax abatement
mhm,
negotiation stuff, or the companies, the green energy companies who are hoping to land a tax abatement when it comes time for them to apply for one. And so those are the companies that are putting on they're the sponsors for a lot of
yeah,
that stuff. And is anything nefarious? I wouldn't blame anybody. I wouldn't go out and say I have evidence or anything like that, but it feels dirty when it's happening like that for government, right? Like,
yeah,
but who else is going to pay for this government conference? I mean, the alternative is taxpayer money would have to go and pay for all of that. And so
yeah,
I don't know what the balance for that is,
yeah,
because when you look at it, it looks and it feels dirty. But then you go, well, how else are they've got to get training. We've got to make sure these guys
yeah,
are getting educated on the things and that they need. So what's the alternative?
yeah. And the reason I asked that is because like we talked about before, the consistent answer back to the public seems to be too rehearsed. Like everybody had
Yes.
it was like question 3 on the test that all the commissioners took and said, oh, nope, we have to have an abatement or we're going to get sued. And you're like, huh,
Yeah.
that guy said it in that county and that guy said it in that county.
That
And now
part I that
it's,
part I do have the proof about, right? Like I do have, you know, from my public information request, I do have the proof that they're all being fed, you know,
Mhm.
incorrect information. Now, was that information was the incorrect information purposefully planted or is it a genuine misunderstanding of how this law works? I don't know.
Hmm.
I tend to always think that the easiest answer is probably the best answer, and humans are we're a species of mediocrity, right? Like we always do the least amount of work to get the most amount of reward. It's there's a handful of us that go out and work all the time, and we, your Elon Musk's and your that guy that ran Apple, Tim Cook, for
Hmm.
forever. Those are the guys that you can look at and say, okay, those guys work nonstop. Your Jeff Bezos's, and they probably had some good opportunities that came up at the right time, but they're spending their days working, right,
Hmm.
making sure they get and the rest of us, we work hard but not too hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I still want to watch TV in the evening and, relax and go play golf on the weekends and stuff like that. And so I don't think these folks that are doing this stuff are any different. And if they misunderstood, then they misunderstood. But the ramifications it has are big, right? Like if you have a state who has been trained now,
Hmm.
like the lion's share of the state has been trained to think, that this incorrect information is correct, then they aren't making good deals when they get to the table to start negotiating, because they think, oh my gosh, if I don't take the deal that I'm being offered, what if they
Hmm.
walk away and I bankrupt my county?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's not a good position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important. I want to wrap it up too, because I told you I'd only keep you for a half hour and we're about 45 minutes. So I
That's
apologize,
okay.
but
No worries.
it's a really important conversation. I was really looking forward to this because I, I always encourage, because I'm not a Harvard, guy or anything like
Me
that.
either.
I can't open up a textbook and then recite it after reading it once. That's not, but I like to think that I'm street smart. I'm a hard worker. I want to know about the things that are affecting my life. Like you said, the lack of knowledge about our big investments, like how our houses work and how our taxes work and all those things is detriment to a society that's chosen comfort over work, for sure, because somebody else would just do it for me. And when somebody else does it for you, that's where the problems start. And I really want the general public, especially in these rural neighborhoods, whatever those are, and the rural neighborhoods, to start being aware of these projects, get active on Facebook, go to the town hall meetings, go to the county commissioner meetings. Yes, they're going to be boring. There's a lot of
Oh, they're
agenda items
so
that don't make
boring.
any sense,
Yep.
but just get an understanding of how things work. I think that's so important. Like I'm on the planning and zoning board here of our little town, Tom Bean, and it's just a great insight. And there's great people on that board, and we get to see the projects, and there's people that are really smart in land development and stuff like that. So I learn what the right questions are to ask. That stuff's really important for your local community. So if any message can come out of something like this, it's get educated. The
Yes.
knowledge is there. Yes, it's not going to be interesting. It's not going to be something that you're going to be like, wow, I want to dedicate my life to tax abatement policy. That's not going to happen. But it'll help you understand and give you some clarity and put a lens on the things that are happening around you. And maybe even just point out how a lot of this big industry, the green industry, some other things like this, do not have any of our best interests in mind.
Oh yeah.
It's personal interest. There's a lot of money. This is, we're not building malls anymore. We're not building high rises. We're not building strip malls. Even the QSR hard corner, fast food restaurant business is going down. If there's, real estate investment trusts, if there's big funds to be spent, this is where they're looking to spend them, because this is where the
Yes.
return is. So you have to understand that this is about a return for somebody's portfolio. It's not about your best interests. So when they're talking about water, power, light, noise, everything else that goes into it, it's a sales pitch to get you to say yes.
Yeah.
And you better get educated on how that stuff's going to impact your life and your kids' life, especially in these rural, quote unquote neighborhoods, how that affects, the growth in the year. So
And they're
that,
they're sending their best salesperson. They're not sending the B team. They
yep,
send the A team in there to make it just shiny and
yep,
rainbows everywhere you look.
Yep. The A team is here. So, Mike, I super appreciate it. I want to stay in touch with you. I'm certainly going to follow. I just got so much out of our conversation last week. I hope a lot of people get a lot out of this. I think we'll definitely have to do it again because I think there's a lot of stuff that's evolving, and just in the 4 days since we talked last, I've learned, I have pages and pages saved, and I kind of geeked out on it and thought it was really interesting. And you were 100% right. Nothing that you said, I couldn't find backup for. So it was it was just a really interesting deep dive into it, and I'm better educated now, and I want other people to be better educated. So I really appreciate that, and
Yeah,
thank you
thanks.
for jumping on. I'm an unknown. I'm just just a community advocate here in up here, and I just want to have a voice, and I love our community, and I want a future for my kids, and and everything that they do. And the people around me and my neighbors, I want, good futures for them. So that's what this is all about. What do you have a specific tag I could put into the feed or anything that you want where you're putting out a lot of your content?
Yeah, KNOW, leoncounty.org.
Okay. So no,
That's,
leoncounty.org. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
that's got links to every one of my social media pages on it, and then that's kind of I put posts which are going to be like my opinion about a lot of things, and then I have like an explainers section on that site, which is where I break down complicated topics like what
Yep.
is a BES, and what is a data center, and what's a tax abatement, and what's a pilot payment, and I've got tax abatement calculators and all kinds of stuff on there. And then documents we get, any kind of public information requests we throw those on there. And then I've got a podcast just like you, man. I'm just a guy sitting in Leon County,
Yeah.
thinking what can I do to get the message out? And so, we've got a small podcast here that, we interviewed lots and lots of political candidates during the primaries and stuff like that. And then I've managed to get some pretty good guests on, like Dr. Charles Porter. We were curious about how water worked, and that guy has got
Very
all the
cool.
information on water and things like that. So I'm right here with you, man. Just a guy in a little county trying to make a difference.
Yeah. People need to know. Like, it's funny because people have asked, like, how much money are you making on the podcast? I said, what are you talking about?
I'll tell you, I've lost a few $1,000s on this adventure so far.
This little recording platform make sure I don't make any money, but because it's really not about that. It's like I said, I intended to geek out on history because I've just met so many cool. I love history, and I thought we were going to be talking about cowboys and Indians and hidden treasures and stuff, and here we are talking about data centers. So. But it's important, and it's relevant to our community. So, Mike, I really appreciate you, man. You're super interesting, and thanks for getting the word out and doing the work. And let's keep in touch, and I'll keep tagging your stuff, and I'll put this out here in the next few hours, and let's just keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
All right, appreciate you, brother.
Take care.